Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about the Tortured Poets Department. Just kidding. We are here to talk about two different works that I read recently by two different poets. One is a memoir in verse and partially containing like actual like poems like the way that you're thinking, and one is a book of poetry. The first is How the Boogeyman Became a Poet by Tony Keith Jr., which was just released last month. Shout out to Libro FM for giving me a audio copy because wow, was that an incredible production quality. And the second is Joy and Misery, Poems by D. Fretter. D is a booktube friend of mine, book talk and booktube friend of mine, who is a creative that you should be watching. His channel is below, so is his TikTok. Tony Keith's Twitter can also be found below. I set goals for myself this year, and one of the goals that I set was to try to do different series. If I'm being honest, I would like to do less authors behaving badly videos, even though they are very easy to do because they don't require me reading anything other than tweets and I don't know, sometimes a blog post, maybe an article from New York Times. But I am continuously trying to like improve on my actual reviewing because I would like to be good at it. So I'm trying to do more series that are like compare and contrast videos, as well as dabbling in reading things that are outside of my comfort zone. My comfort zone is typically like fantasy, and I have like a comfort genre, which is YA thrillers, which I just find like compulsively digestible. And one of the things outside my comfort zone to review is poetry. I don't know anything about poetry. I used to write poetry when I was a kid. Everything would rhyme, and I thought that I was pretty good at it, although it should have been a red flag that at 9 years old I wrote a poem about depression. But I don't actually know anything about poetry. I can make some lines rhyme. So all that to say, this is the first in me trying to talk more about a genre that I honestly don't know how to review very well, but I am trying. So let's talk about Tony Keith Jr.'s book, How the Boogeyman Became a Poet, which is Tony's memoir in verse. Tony is a poet, a writer, and a hip-hop educator. This book is his YA memoir in verse. It is his debut, and it is a great debut. Again, the production quality of the audiobook itself, which he does narrate, is so good. The synopsis says that this book is tracing his journey from being a closeted gay black teen battling poverty, racism, and homophobia to becoming an openly gay first-generation college student who finds freedom in poetry. Perfect for fans of Elizabeth Acevedo, George M. Johnson, and Jacqueline Woodson. I haven't read anything from Jacqueline Woodson yet personally, but I can confirm that this book is absolutely perfect for fans of, which includes me, Elizabeth Acevedo's The Poet X and All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. These are two of my favorite books of all time, and this is doing very similar things to both of these. It is a coming of age story in verse, like The Poet X is, that gets deep into like the nitty-gritty of feelings when you are a young person and how poetry can help you verbalize and like shine a light on those feelings and really like bring to the surface parts of yourself that you keep hidden and help you to articulate like exactly how you're feeling. And it's very much like All Boys Aren't Blue in that it is a memoir of a queer black kid experiencing things like school prom and entering college, and also coming to terms with their own identity as a queer person. The synopsis further reads, Tony dreams about life after high school where his poetic voice can find freedom on the stage and page. But the boogeyman has been following Tony since he was 6 years old. Tony wants to be the first in his family to attend college, but there's no path to follow. He has feelings for boys, desires that don't align with the script he thinks is set for him and his girlfriend Blue. Despite his supportive network of family and friends, Tony doesn't breathe a word to anyone about his feelings. As he grapples with his sexuality and moves from high school to college, he struggles with loneliness while feeling solace in gay chat rooms and writing poetry. But how do you find your poetic voice when you are hiding the most important parts of yourself, and how do you escape the boogeyman when it's lurking inside of you? So I think that this is a very poignant and beautifully crafted memoir that really powerfully expresses his experiences as a young person, as a queer person, as a young queer black person navigating adolescence and these like really formative parts of adolescence. It's very lyrical, it's very intensely emotional, but then it's also very funny when it says that he has this like network of family and friends. It's not kidding, and even though he doesn't always feel like he can come out to these people, the love is obviously there. Like, that was very clear, and I liked that I listened to it in audiobook format because you could tell that he was expressing how much love he felt from his family. It's a very intimate glimpse into his life in this very formative part where he's making all of these self-discoveries. I don't know if the camera just picked that up, but I have never had a conversation for more than 5 seconds with my next door neighbor who I share a wall with. I don't know her name, but I know her husband is Kyle and that her oldest is Colin only because I can hear her yelling at them all the time. She just yelled, Kyle, can you bring me a towel? I feel like I shouldn't be able to hear that. I feel like I shouldn't be able to hear that. I'm sorry. So as I was saying, Tony really invites us into this very intimate part of his inner world and tells us about these self-discoveries and these challenges that he experienced as an adolescent in a very lyrical, poetic way. And I think just like All Boys Aren't Blue really is able to verbalize what it feels like to be a young person struggling with coming to terms with your identity, especially when you are a young queer black man, because there's so much that you are told you have to be in order to be a masculine person. So if you really loved those conversations in All Boys Aren't Blue, you should try How the Boogeyman Became a Poet, or vice versa. It has that same raw honesty that George M. Johnson expressed in All Boys Aren't Blue. We see the awkwardness of first love, the confusion that comes with understanding your identity as a queer person, navigating heteronormativity as a young person, navigating, well, I have a girlfriend who I care about, but I feel attracted to boys. Tony really has a gift with words, truly and honestly, and is able to express, like, exploring these very complex parts of being an adolescent while still being relatable for teens, in my opinion. And I think this will be really good in helping teens who are, maybe they don't know they'll have an interest in poetry and expressing themselves creatively through that. I think that this will be a way to open those doors for other teens. Not that Tony or I are teens, but he in the book is a teen. Sorry. You can tell this book is deeply personal. Obviously it's a memoir, but its themes of like self-discovery, resilience, and the quest for identity are universal. So even though it's written for a young adult audience, I think readers of all ages will find themselves in these pages. Poets will find themselves in these pages. People who experienced poverty and entering college, dealing with that, will find themselves in these pages very much so. But Tony was very obviously intentional in writing this as a love letter to his younger self and the youth of today, who need to hear things that he probably wishes that someone had told him when he was this age. Although many did, he again had a very loving circle of like family and family friends and friends. He even mentions how he hopes his work will be helpful for the youth of today in track 80.
Or to write poems at the wishes of others and say, God, grant them these, because these be your people trying to get to you by getting through me. But I'm not a medium. I actually wear a powerful little poet not standing very tall, and yet still trying to acquire it all. Y'all, I'm in search of contemplation. I'm trying to write haikus that I can put in the curriculum in high schools that get students to contemplate on whether getting high is cool. Yo, I want to think myself to a literary breakthrough.
If I were to guess at I am, again, not a poet. If I were to guess at how he tried to bring this story to life while really like getting the most out of doing this in verse, I would say that probably the way that the poems ebb and flow is trying to mimic like the highs and lows of being a youth. And then again, using like very evocative prose, you're trying to paint a picture for your audience of not just what it looks like to experience these things, but what it feels like, and sort of bridge the gap between the two. And again, the audiobook is a great production that I really feel like highlights this. I think that's exactly how Tony wanted you to receive it. Now, if you can't listen to audiobooks, that's fine. If you have the ability and the access to the audio version, though, I do recommend trying it that way. I do say the same about both The Poet X and All Boys Aren't Blue. It's a whole experience hearing it in the author's voice, and then also the Boogeyman gets sound effects. I think that this is a really important memoir for teens, or really anybody who used to be a teen, because it can kind of help contextualize like things that you went through and help you see them in a new light. I think it's important that we have books like this where we're doing these very important discussions around self-discovery and taking your anxieties about yourself, like Tony's anxieties about being a queer black person, and channeling them into your art. So it's really about like the transformative power of art. So whether you're a teenager navigating adolescence and all of that complexity and all of that those really tumultuous times, or you're an adult reflecting on those times like I am, I think that this book is going to resonate very deeply with mass amount of people. How is the poetry itself? I don't know. I cannot figure out for the life of me how to tell you what's good or bad poetry the way that I can tell you about like prose and, fiction. I always kind of struggle navigating how to review memoirs in general. I think that the poetry is good. I enjoyed it. I loved hearing it in Tony's voice. I can't say that there's any one line in particular that stuck out to me. The parts that stuck out to me the most were the story parts, and how he did a really good job narrating that, and how when he got anxious about being this young queer black kid, especially like when he's navigating his anxiety, when he's dealing with his anxieties and expressing them about how he and his girlfriend deal with like a lot of heteronormativity. People are like, you're supposed to get married, you're supposed to have kids, you're supposed to have sex on prom night, you're supposed to do this. And he's like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but I feel like I'm attracted to boys even though I care about my girlfriend. And yet every time I think about this, the boogeyman, it's like, you know, sitting on my chest. Him talking about his anxieties about being a young queer college kid, and a young queer college kid who is, you know, trying to find a safe space to talk about queerness with somebody, and then being a young poor college kid, one who doesn't know where his next meal is coming from, has to constantly lie to his friends about this, doesn't know how to get a ride home to visit with his mom even though she only lives 45 minutes away, having to hide all of this from his peers. I just wanted to reach for the screen and hug him. Him going to his, actually I might tear up. No. Him going to his spoken word event at the end and all his friends cheering on him, you know, expressing his poem really struck a chord with me. So all of these things stayed with me, but I can't tell you any line of poetry that stayed with me. However, I think that this is a fantastic book. I gave it 4.5 stars. I am clearly still figuring out how to review poetry. So let's talk about an actual book of poetry that I read. So Joy and Misery by D. Fritter is D's first book of poetry. The synopsis says, in his first poetry collection, indie pop spoken word artist D. Fritter shares his unique story and charmingly optimistic point of view. D wrestles with topics like love, loss, faith, religion, and his adoption story. Joy and Misery is a heartfelt, upbeat, rhythmic piece of work that reflects both the good and not so good parts of life. So when I finished this book, I wrote on Goodreads, I have no clue how to rate or review poetry, and I stand by that. Which, I stand by that. However, I got a couple comments that did help me with talking about this book. Chrissy said, maybe talk about who you think will appreciate this book the most. God, I need dark mode on my computer or my dyslexia is so bad. Oh my god, how do I get dark mode on this thing? Also, I like to know if the author is one that tends to stick to traditional poetic techniques, if the poems rhyme, if they're all connected, or just a selection of poems, if they're super sad, heavy topics, etc. And then Taylor on Goodreads said to talk about form, impact, sound, and if the poems struck anything in you. So there's a mixed bag of poems in here. They're all about D's experiences and feelings. Wow, geez Louise. My knowledge of poetry is very limited, so I'm not able to like succinctly tell you much about form. Many of them rhyme, some of them don't. We have some that are like 4 lines long and some that are a couple of pages. It's a very short book, but I did take my time in reading over it just so that I could really like sit with what I was reading. I found this to be really impactful. I related a lot to D speaking about religion quite a bit and feeling sort of disappointed in humanity because the God we were told about seems to be 2 different people. A loving, all-knowing father and then a deeply jealous and self-obsessed God that reflects too much of humanity's worst qualities. D's disillusionment with religion and religious people is so incredibly relatable for me, and I think anybody who's like deconstructed at any level will find themselves reflected in D's thoughts about this. I've also mentioned a couple times on this channel, but my family was deeply impacted by my grandfather being given up by his birth mom and having grown up in foster care, never being adopted. He lived with 17 different foster families by the time he was 18, and he never found out who his biological family was. He wasn't even given their real names. I eventually did a ton of digging and paid a lot of money to learn who and where he came from, and I even found his half-sister who I now have a relationship with. But this always felt like a haunting presence in my family's life, and after I had my first kid, I desperately needed to know where my grandpa came from because that was part of my kid's story. So I decided to end the mystery and give my grandpa some closure, even though he died a long time ago. He died when I was a toddler. And so all that to say, D's poems about his feelings about his biological parents, his adoptive parents and siblings, and his experiences being a child of adoption made me tear up because they reminded me of trying to piece my grandpa's story together, of where he came from, and how even when you have people, there's a piece of you that is missing, or at least makes you feel like you lack wholeness. I often think about in his whole life, my grandpa, the only person he ever met who was related to him was his own kids. So D's poems about his adoptive siblings, his birth mom, his feelings towards them, they really struck that chord in me again, and I definitely teared up while reading. Who else do I think that this is for? Basically anybody. There's a lot of like really universally human feelings in here. A lot of rawness in these poems discussing feelings like, am I even worthy of being alive? There's a very impactful poem in here about a dear friend of Dee's who he lost, who had died by suicide. I think anyone who's lost somebody to suicide, someone who made them feel like they were worthy, will be majorly impacted and feel a lot of feelings reading that. I appreciate that, like, sort of like the title implies, Joy and Misery. This really goes through like the full breadth and scope of what it means to feel as a human, what it means to ponder immense misery, and what it feels like to experience incredible joy, even in just feeling alive by being in awe of other humans and their existence, but also being very raw and honest and reflective about how sometimes we wish that we could just disappear. Some of the poems that I marked were coffins. The box of masculinity feels like a coffin because you must kill so much of yourself to fit inside of it. Basically just summed up in 4 words, toxic masculinity, which was really well done. And then another one that I really loved was thin places. A thin place is a piece of energy where the veil between this world and the eternal world is thin. Sometimes these are mountaintops or ancient ruins. The thinnest place I know is a kitchen table surrounded by friends. He has a really good one. It's long, so I won't read the whole thing, on soul food, talking about how he was not raised in a black household despite being a black kid, and talks about black culture and feeling very connected to it, but his adoptive parents discouraging this connection. It says, soul food is more than a type of cuisine. It's a rebellious act of creativity, resourcefulness, and defiant joy. West African slaves on southern plantations, given small scraps, they combined the culinary sensibilities of their homeland with the native ingredients of this new land to turn garbage into gourmet, something that could sustain you with just a little. It's almost divine. Didn't God make Adam out of ashes? Didn't Jesus turn water into wine? Or feed 5,000 people with a couple loaves of bread and fish? It reminds me of poets, by which I mean all artists, taking the garbage life throws at us and making something that feeds. One that actually made me really sad. I'm not gonna cry, that's so embarrassing. Dee actually has a video of him doing this in like a spoken word format in front of an audience, and it's called That's My Baby. I can link it for you down below, and it's talking about how, like, at a basketball game, watching some other kid's mom jump up and say, "That's my baby," and how it says, knowing I'll never hear my mother say that about me. She once told me, "You will always be the deepest part of my heart and soul." I wonder if that's why it's so easy to keep me buried. As a mom, I'm going to not say anything else. And it talks about the loneliness of being the only black kid you know when you're adopted into a white family and you're not in a community that has a lot of other black folks, in this really good poem called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. When you're the only black kid you know, you get lonely pretty quick. Other kids make me feel like a freak. I was the literal black sheep in my own family. At least the turtles had each other. They were best friends. They were brothers. When I watched them on Sunday mornings, I'd wonder if they could use another. I was longing for community. That wound still runs deep. I wouldn't have minded being a freak if I'd had somebody that looked like me. I think that was my favorite one. And at the end it says, "Thank you. My deepest hope is that something in this book spoke to you. Something that made you feel a little less lonely. Maybe something brought you a little joy. I hope this book can be a friend to you. I may not know you, but I'm sending you love." So FYI, the only format that this is available in is that print copy. So it's not available on ebook. Just FYI, there's a few typos in here. One that caught me and made me kind of chuckle is the word waste, as in trash, being used when the word waste was meant. And then there's like a couple missing words. It happens. And in a shorter book, you're just likely to notice it more. Like, even in the wise man sphere, there's, you know, words missing. Even Patrick Rothfuss can't always miss it, but always, you know, get every word in there, and the editor isn't going to catch up everyone. But, you know, just saying that in case that matters to you in purchasing like an actual physical copy of a book. Dee also has several TikToks performing some of his work. I recommend checking them out. They are down below. Also, he just released music, which is awesome. So I didn't like get paid to promote this or anything. He was talking about his book, so I bought it and I thought I'd review it. Anyways, I would love to to know what some of your favorite books of poetry of all time are, so I can add them to my list for this year. They can be books in verse if you'd like, or actual books of poetry. I plan to read some by Ruby Carr, especially because Florida is consistently trying to, and sometimes succeeding in, banning Ruby Carr's books of poetry. Shout out Julie Gebhardt, who wanted Milk and Honey out of our school district because Moms for Liberty told her it's bad. And by golly, she's gonna believe everything they say. What a loser. Speaking of being banned, if you had to ask me, since All Boys Aren't Blue is banned, and so is the Poet X in certain areas, I do believe that Tony Keats Jr.'s book is also going to be challenged. I think that I unfortunately think that just by nature of him being a queer person and a person of color, talking about the very statistically typical thing of having sex when you are a high school student, just by virtue of all that, people who are very into book banning, shout out Florida where I live, are probably going to want to ban this one too. The Poet X is banned in certain parts of Florida, and in other states they also tried to ban. I know it got challenged a few times. I've talked about this in another video. And All Boys Aren't Blue is one of the most banned books in the United States. So I think that when your comp titles are accurate and are those two books in particular, you're looking, I mean, conservatives are going to be like, oh, this book is like those books, ban it too. Like that's the logic we're working with here. So mark my words, this book's going to end up challenged. I would love to be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that I'm right. This is going to be the next one that's going to be challenged. They're going to call it critical race theory, even though they don't know what that means. They'll probably call it neo-Marxism, even though what the fuck do they even mean by that? And they'll say, well, it has sexual content, even though it's a fucking memoir. Just, oh my god. So anyway, all that to say, I think it's probably going to get banned too, or at least challenged, even though I think that it's a resource and that it's appropriate for the age group it's trying to reach, and I think it's a great book, and for all those reasons it'll end up challenged and banned too. Aren't these fun times we're living in? Poetry getting banned for being sexual content, and yet Song of Solomon in the Bible is right there. Alright, thank you so much for watching. Leave your favorite poetry down below. I appreciate you. Check out these books, check out their authors. Links are down below. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye. Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons, and those are Alexander, Brittany Bobitney, Cami, Choco's Waiting for Not All Men podcast, Chris, DJ Rocktopus, Ellie, Emperor's New Blues, Aaron with 2 E's, Eric, Ethel Go Lightly, Galaxy Bot, JC Murphy, Jack, Jess, Jesse, Jill, John E, Julie D, Kaleno K, Casey McKenzie, Kate W, Caitlin M, Quinn, Lady Kittybug, Lemon Jelly, Lex, Lily B, Max B, Mixer Boneless, Alice, Panoramic Demon. Oh man, wow, that was a mouth exercise. Rachel C, Rain, Reese, SJ, Samar, Scarlet, Shadow Auntie, Shiny, SMK, Spoopy, Steph, 2 Orbit, Chai Guy, and the Salem T. Lynn. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend. So thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. And last but not least, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are Alicia, Amanda, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ashley, Ava, Ballads and Bookends, Beck, Blake Lemon Pants, Blythe, Bookish Bats, Bookish Brain Rot, Bree, Caitlin, Cardinal Ginger, Carlin. Also, if you can hear any sort of Dragon Ball stuff going on in the background of this right now, I'm so sorry, but my kid's home. Sorry. Carlin, Casper, Kate W, Catherine, Kathy, Chris, CJ, Clementine, Cole, Colleen, Corwin, Cosmic, Danielle, Darren, Deborah, Diet Goth, Dilf Enthusiast, Dorian, Dorothea, Ebby, Ember, Emerald Dodge, Emily A, Emily L, Emma, Aaron, Ezra Moon, Fiona, Gadarn, you're gonna have to tell me how to say that, I'm sorry, Hannah C, Harvey Kuro, Haley, Ilianaka, India Inks, JM Tennant, Jay is on Olympus, Jelly V, Jen Michelle, Genderqueer, Jenny G, Justice Sue, Jillian, Jojo Bookish, Kai, Kat, Catherine, Katie, Kayala, Kendra, Kiara, Laughing Cat Dog, Laura G, Lauren G, Lazarus Ray, Library of Scars, Lindsay M, Lisa B, Lisa L, LP Aldiver, Lou Siri, Lustful Octopus, Martin, MV Marlowe, Madison, Man-Eating Plant, Marcella, Marquita, Malara, Mentally Unwell, May, MK Books, Molly, James, Natalie, Never, Nicole G, Nicole R, Nyan Binary, Paige P, Penny Shilling, Foxglove, Rachel B, Reba, Rebecca, Rivi, Ronnie, Rosie Thorns, Rowan, Secoria, Sadie Selby, Sayer Riley, Sakia Lume, Samantha O, Sarah H, Sarah the Bear, Bear, Sarah Z, Shamed, Shannon, Sheen Onion, Sean, T. Delegati, Tay, Talia, Three Old Dogs, Tiana, Toast, Trashcan Teddy, Ty, Tito Phoenix, Wiki Cherry, and Writer A. Thank you all so much for being here and for being a friend.